CPR is almost always demonstrated wrong on TV and in films. This is quite shocking considering the amount of cardiac arrests that happen in the home where TVs are ever present. People learn a lot from TV, as the more people watch something, the more they're likely to take that and apply it to real life. I myself am trained in first aid, CPR and AED as it's required for my part-time job as a lifeguard. However, saying that, I believe it is an extremely valuable qualification to have. The more people trained in first aid, the more people there are who can help in situations when needed. I think demonstrated CPR wrong on TV and in film is a miseducation to the general public and costing more lives than saving them. Let's take an insight into what other professionals in the field think.
Have you ever had to perform CPR on someone?
Yeah, over the summer there was this sort of one kid that was a camper, drowned, and I had to use that on them. Well, basically it was like a lake, so I was just doing my normal thing. Kids have an hour of swimming between like 10 and 11, so there's usually 2 lifeguards. Well, there's one for every 20 kids there, that's the rule. So one of the kids shouted that there was a child underwater, so I just saw him and ran in, and the water was quite shallow, so it was up to like my hip, so I could just pick them up and take them out. And then when I took them, picked them up, I heard and I felt that they weren't breathing, so like my training kicked in and I just performed CPR, gave them 5 breaths, 30 compressions. Yeah, and I mean, like when they first came out, their face was really like pale and blue, yeah. And then like after that, they started coughing and just like vomited. I don't know if they vomited, I don't know what happened, but so I just put them in a like recovery position.
It was a long time ago, 1990. I was at work and it was a patient on the ward that I worked on. During breakfast, she got up from the table and walked towards where the staff were standing, walked past us, and she sort of had a glazed look about her face, and then she just collapsed on the floor. So we commenced CPR. I can remember it very vividly. I started chest compressions while staff went off to get the suction and all the equipment. It wasn't long after we started the chest compressions that all the equipment arrived from the clinical room, when they tried to do obviously put oxygen on, that they realised that she was impacted with food. So there was no air that could actually get in, and even doing the CPR on her, we couldn't dislodge the food that had impacted from her throat. So we didn't actually do the CPR for very long. We then tried the Hyman's manoeuvre to try and dislodge the food, but she was pronounced dead. I'd say probably 10 minutes from collapsing to sort of live with the different things, and a doctor arriving on the ward. Because obviously, because it was seen as a death in custody, we had coroner's court that we had to attend, so that brought it all back up again. And what they said was she was actually, there was no way we could have saved her, which did obviously help in one way, that you hadn't done anything wrong or anything like that, because they said she was probably dead from when she got up and moved across, because she was impacted from sort of down here all the way up to here. So there was just no way, anything we could have done could have saved her on that.
The time I've had to deal with CPR was when I was 15 years old. I've been trained from the St John ambulance since I was 5, so I was just out and about. I'd seen somebody collapse and the adrenaline just kicked in. It was a normal day, I was out for a walk, and I just went up to them and I was like, hello, are you okay? Didn't get a response. I checked their airway, that was clear, looked for breathing, and I found that he wasn't breathing. So I just went straight into my compressions and done my rescue breaths. I didn't actually feel a lot while I was actually doing CPR because your adrenaline just kicks in. But afterwards, when the ambulance arrived and paramedics took over, I was like, my gosh, did that really happen? And then after they took him away, I was kind of like, okay, I hope he's alive, or I hope I've done something right. That night then, I had a phone call saying, yes, he's survived. So it's like, that made me a bit better. Actually, to this day now, I know he's still alive. After that, I've done it a further twice after that, when I was 16 and when I was 18, but it wasn't actually doing the compressions or the rescue breaths, it was actually using the defib instead. So somebody else was there doing the compressions, and I just pressed the shock button and basically like sent the shocks through them. I've been quite lucky where all 3 patients have survived. And to my knowledge, when I last spoke to one of them, they were back to normal health. I don't know about the 3rd one, but I did get phone calls afterwards saying that they were still alive. So,
Would you say you suffered from PTSD?
At the time, I would have said no, but reflecting back on this now, on that incident, because it's still very vivid in my mind, and I did have trouble sleeping after it happened, and the one thing that I will always remember, even though it was sort of like 1990, which you're looking at sort of like nearly 30 years ago, was the fact of once we stopped doing the CPR and we were trying to obviously do the Hyman's manoeuvre to try and dislodge the impact food, was I was down the end, we'd got onto a bed by this point, I was down the end of the bed, and as somebody was doing it, I thought her eyes were going to pop out of her head, and that memory has always stayed with me and stayed with me. Well, I still remember it now, but at the time it did affect me. So if that happened now, I would say that I did suffer, would have suffered with PTSD.
yes, I was diagnosed with that by my GP. I was getting nightmares a few times a night of having to do CPR again, and what would have happened if he hadn't survived. Would I have been in coroner's court for doing something wrong? Post-traumatic stress, it was a traumatic incident for me, and not only for the casualty but for me as well. It took a lot of guts and feelings out of me for a while. I was a bit I didn't know if I wanted to do it anymore because it was that scary. It was verge of death for somebody else, and it was just a bit.
Maybe afterwards. I mean, at the time it was just instinct. I had to do it. I wasn't thinking about it. I just did it. But a few days later, I was just like how lucky it was that I was able to get to him in time.
What tips would you give to someone who is a newly trained first aider who hasn't yet had to resuscitate another person?
Best thing to do is to stay calm when dealing with a very serious situation. Get help immediately as fast as possible.
And remember that you are the person that is trained, so you do know what you're doing.
I suppose to stay calm, assess the situation, and then do what you've been trained to do.
I suggest going out and maybe purchasing a pocket mask or something like that, because that stops cross-contamination as well. Because obviously you don't want to give rescue breaths and somebody's saliva's in your mouth. That's a good tip in case you do ever have to come across it. But just researching, use British Heart Foundation, the British Red Cross is good as well, St John Ambulance. There's tons of videos on YouTube. You can find them anywhere.
So I think the best thing to do is just stay really calm. I mean, obviously it's a stressful situation, but the best thing you can do is just stay calm. Keep a level head, because if you're calm or not calm, if you're calm, you're more likely to do correct things, really.
What 3 pieces of advice would you give to people who aren't trained in first aid and can only go off of what they've seen on TV, i.e. the Vinnie Jones British Heart Foundation advert, to give them the courage to take action and possibly save a life?
To make sure that they get help, first of all, to phone up and get help. They could go for training themselves and just basically stay very calm as possible.
If you know what you're doing, just go for it. Don't self-doubt yourself. That's what I done, and it made me more anxious. Whereas if I hadn't self-doubted myself and just got on with it, like, when you're actually doing it, you don't really think about it. But just keep refreshing yourself on it as well. Don't like train yourself once and then think, oh yeah, I know it forever. Just keep refreshing.
Really recommend doing training and as well going on to further training so you keep the skills and the knowledge maintained, so when you do come to that scenario you can just go into autopilot and take control and the situation and deal with the incident.
If they're able to, definitely have that skill under your belt. I mean, there's a lot of places that, most workplaces offer like first aid training and stuff like that, so like they could like take them up. There's a lot of information online as well, like nowadays just everything's online, so they could just go watch YouTube videos and stuff like that. I mean, it's just good to have, really, because you never know, like, it might happen to a family member, just collapse, so it's just a life skill, I'd say, that it's good to have under your belt.
The only thing I would say would be, if it's better to do something than nothing, so even if they did the compressions and the breaths, they're not perfect, it's better that you're doing something on the person, there's more chance of bringing them back. Or if a shout for help and they bring a defib, the defib will prompt them and tell them what to do, so it should be alright if they do. Better to do something than nothing as well.
Approximately 80% of out-of-hospital cardiac arrests occur in the home, 20% will occur in public places. Do you think the media do enough for the public in preparation for real-life situations that may require first aid or CPR?
I don't think they do, because I think maybe a few amount of times in my life have I actually seen an advert on TV or on Facebook or anything to do with like CPR or anything. Like, I know it because I've been trained in it, but regards to like my younger sibling and like my father and them, they don't know how to do it and they've just gone off what they've seen on like the TV and the film. So I definitely think the media needs to like step up their game and definitely present more.
No, I think they could do a lot more. There could be more things on the television. They could produce booklets. They could put things in newspapers, and just generally, when there has been an incident, it always gets a little bit of publicity, but they don't follow it up by saying this is what you should do if it happened to you. They could do a bit more of that.
I very much agree with what Chrissy said. And particularly with social media like Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat, all those other social media accounts, I really recommend that they could easily put something forward to that as posts, so it can give a little backup for everybody. That's just even if they're browsing on their phone, which a lot of people do on a daily basis, they can then have at least some sort of knowledge that they're gaining every day. So then when they're ready to do it in real life, if it does happen to occur to them, they can then get on and get help and do their best to help somebody.
Also with that, with the social media, they used to make loads of posters of like a diagram of what to do. They could have more than posters up. They could put it online, so even people might not speak the language and know what they're doing. They've seen the pictures and then roughly have an idea of what they should be doing, as it were.
I mean, I've seen like the Royal National Lifeguard videos that they had recently, where like how to float if you're like diving, just spread your hands. That video. I mean, they could do more. They could educate like younger kids in school, like offer first aid training and things like that in school.
Can you name any TV series or films off the top of your head that you recall seeing CPR or other acts of first aid shown inaccurately?
Quite recently, I remember being sat in the cinema watching Jumanji, the jungle one, like the new one with Jack Black and that, and I love Nick Jonas, and he'd like fallen down as his character, and Jack Black was there going, I'm doing CPR, and he only done 3 chest compressions and then gave continuous rescue breaths. That's doing nothing whatsoever, because you need to pump the blood around the body, which is why you do so many compressions.
They've shown on This Morning a few times wrong,
GMTV.
Yeah.
That's what they say a few times wrong.
Well, the most famous ones, which you do see it done incorrectly, is like Casualty and Hobby City. I think they're the two ones that are most on the TV, you know, like for series that are on a weekly basis. But I think there's lots of films, most films that are out there now, they do CPR incorrectly.
I can't really remember the name of the film, but there was one where the man collapses, obviously, and instead of the like actual right compressions, they just smack like their chest and stuff like that's just.
I think that's Mission Impossible film.
Yeah, maybe one of them.
They show them doing a few compressions and the person gets back up. But all the people we've trained, we've known to do CPR is that it doesn't, after a few presses they don't get up, it takes a while before they actually get back up. So it's kind of a bit of a fantasy, as it were, saying that you do one or two things and the person will jump up. So that's a little bit incorrect.
Television can be educational. Do you think that by showing correct demonstrations of CPR and first aid in TV shows and films would help people gain a better understanding as well as prepare them better for when it's required?
Yes, definitely. Like, just babysitting, like I do a lot of that in my spare time. Kids copy things off TVs and mothers do it as well. Like, I know there's an advert that's gone around, done by St. John itself, where there's been, it's like a little Barbie doll and a jelly baby is choking. And it's because of that advert that so many parents know what to do if their child was to choke. So I definitely think if TV and film portrayed like anything right, then it could become more educational.
Agreed. Yeah, they definitely need to put something on TV the correct way. And as well, there's several scenarios you can put in as well to make if it's like a TV series, for instance, to make it more interesting for people who actually watch. And also, if you have those different scenarios and people have awareness of what scenario they might have encountered in real life.
And it should relate to the number of people that don't make it. So when it's a heart attack, and like we said earlier, that they always fantasy where they make it, it should actually show that the person hasn't made it. We don't want to be sort of doom and gloom, but I think that would be sort of
show reality of what it could happen.
The other thing is with the schools, when the kids are in year 7 and year 8 in high school, when on the first day of high school they should be shown first aid CPR video, so then when they leave school they've got that in their mind. They might not ever do it or never do it again, but they've seen it at some point, so it's
very sort of hit and miss. Some schools will do it, but it should all really be part of your
curriculum,
getting into life pack, where there should be things like riding a bicycle, how to work, to get on the tube and things, should all be sort of ticked off and done in there. It's done by some schools, but it's not done by everybody, so it's a kind of more of a universal thing that everybody's sort of ready for it.
I think they need to do more. I mean, when you look round now, it's all well and good them putting all these defib machines in all supermarkets, you know, railway stations, etc. But people don't actually know how to use them. And I know that a lot of the machines are self-explanatory, you know, it got a picture to show you, you know, where to stick the pads, etc. But no, there isn't enough training. I think if there is situations, I think people would probably not even attempt to use them, or if they did, then they'd be used incorrectly and could cause more deaths or serious instances than if they just left the person to wait for paramedics, etc. to turn up.
I think yes, it would prepare them better, but I think if they would be more prepared than if they haven't watched them videos or learned them things on the TV. But like sometimes you'd need an instructor there, so if you make mistakes and that first aid and stuff like that, mistakes like shouldn't be made, because you need an instructor there to like perfect your CPR technique and stuff like that. So that videos, yeah, they do help you, but you need to perfect it.
If people take note of what's going on in films, and if they see something being done and it's incorrect, then if there was a situation out on the street, if they remember what they've seen on the TV programme or the film, they're going to do it incorrectly.